Inspired Pilot Podcast, Episode 7.
Don't worry where it's going to take you. As long as you enjoy doing it, it'll take you where you need to be.
Welcome to the Inspired Pilot Podcast. Inspiring stories from inspiring pilots from around the world. Now, here is your host, Marvin Robinson.
Okay, welcome to the Inspired Pilot Podcast. This is Marvin Robinson, and I'm super excited to introduce today's featured inspiring pilot, Patty Wagstaff. Welcome, Patty, to the show. Are you ready to inspire today?
Thanks, Marvin. I am. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's go. Patty Wagstaff's achievements, awards, and recognition in aviation is literally the stuff legends are made of. A 6-time member of the US Aerobatic Team and competing at Olympic level, Patty is a 3-time US National Aerobatic Champion and the first woman to ever achieve this title. She flies as a stunt pilot for major motion picture and television projects, supports worthy causes in Africa, a demo pilot, and has even turned her flying skills to fighting fires in California, USA. Patty is one of the world's top airshow pilots, demonstrating before millions of people each year, and now teaches people how to do it at the Patty Wagstaff Aerobatic School in St. Augustine, Florida. Patty has earned her position as one of modern aviation's most recognized trailblazers and ambassadors, a woman dedicated to the sport and the art of aerobatics. Okay, Patty, I've given our listeners, the Inspired Pilots, probably the most condensed overview of your illustrious career so far. Can you take a minute, tell us a little bit about yourself personally, where you're from, and before we jump deeper into your journey, briefly give us an overview of what you're doing aviation-wise now.
Hi, Marvin. Where do I start? I started learning. I grew up in an aviation family, and I think a lot of airshow pilots actually, people that, stay in aviation full-time the way I have for a long time come from aviation families. We're sort of born into it, I think. But I didn't start flying till I moved to Alaska. A lot of people are lucky enough to start when they're really young and their family teaches them to fly, their mom or their dad, generally their dads. And my dad flew big airplanes for Japan Airlines and then flew freight after that. So he flew a lot of different stuff. But and he'd let me sit in the cockpit when I was a kid and when rules were a lot more lax than they are now, and let me fly the airplane. And so it's kind of a big joke that, and it was true, I'd be 10 years old and I'd be flying this DC-7 around Japan with sitting in the left seat with a whole plane load of people in the back. And they didn't know this 10-year-old kid was up there flying. Nowadays, if they heard about that, they'd arrest us, right? But
Exactly.
But that's where I got my start.
Okay, talking about starts, every journey does have to start somewhere. So you weren't always the 3-time US National Aerobatic Champion. Tell us the story, Patty, of how you first got involved with flying and wanting to be a pilot.
I didn't start flying till I moved to Alaska in the late 70s, and I got a job out in a little town called 𝗚𝗏𝗃 out in western Alaska. And my job, I had to fly to all the villages in this region, mostly Eskimo villages, some Aleut and some Indian. And I said to my boss, I said, how do I get around? There's no roads, of course, out in western Alaska. It's pretty remote. And he said, well, you just hire one of the air taxis to fly you around. So I said, okay. So I called an air taxi, and on our first flight to a small village, we stopped to pick somebody up, and on the takeoff, we crashed because the pilot didn't use the full length of the runway, and it was a muddy strip in early spring when all the ice is melting, the snow is melting. So we crashed. We didn't get hurt. We ended up upside down at the end of the runway, and that's when I decided I was going to learn to fly myself, because I thought, this guy's an idiot, and I think I can do better than this. And so I started taking lessons then. And I didn't know where it was going to lead. I had no idea when I started getting my rating. My sister was wanted to be an airline pilot, and she is doing that now. So she's been an airline pilot for a while, but I didn't know what I want to do. But you never know where things are going to take you.
Absolutely. What were you actually doing for your job? What were you doing at that moment when you had to go around?
I had a job as an economic development planner, and so that involved going to all these, I think there are 29 villages in the Bristol Bay region, and assessing what their needs were. And then we put it in a booklet to give to the state so that when money came up for funding different projects, their priorities would be listed. So some of these villages were really tiny, like 50 people. Some were a little bit bigger, like several hundred people. But their priorities were things like maybe a new community center, some of them a boat dock, mostly a lot of fishing villages out there, things like that. Electricity for one of them, didn't have electricity, and they just had a generator. So that was the job, and that was my first trip when we crashed out. And I did many other trips after that were, more successful. So,
God, that must feel like a lifetime away now.
Yeah, it does. But it's funny. That was 1970, I think 9 when that happened. And it does and it doesn't, because I remember my early experiences in aviation so vividly. And I hope I remember them right, because sometimes your memory, plays tricks on you. But
the stories get bigger, right?
Yeah.
Bigger and better.
Yeah. And, so much has happened. And sometimes I forget about things that were really significant. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that did happen. You tell somebody about it and it sounds like a really good story. Or other times, you remember things that seem bigger, bigger than they actually were. But, crashing is pretty big. So I think I remember that one. But
I think that's kind of big, yeah. Okay, let's test your memory now. Let's go back to the beginning, and especially when you were learning to fly.
Yeah.
Let's go into the challenges. So flying inherently has its own challenges, and especially in the beginning. Take us back to the time when back when you were learning how to fly during your initial PPL, and tell us what you found challenging. This is for the benefit of people thinking about learning how to fly, or someone, currently in training. What challenges did you have, and how do you overcome this?
Well, that's a great question. I have the same challenges as anybody else. I mean, there's some people that are maybe a little bit more natural, and people assume because I've done so much flying that, oh, it was easy for you, and so on and so forth. But I had the same things that everybody has. I mean, trying to find the runway and landing, flaring and knowing where to flare, not flaring too high. And I had one interesting situation where I was having trouble finding the runway, on landing. I was dropping it in or whatever. So a friend of my father's took me up one night in a 152, and we went over to Anchorage International Airport, and he had him turn up all the lights and turn the Rabbit on. So there are all these flashing lights at the end of the runway,
yeah. And
he flew me over the lights at like 5 feet, and we just went back and forth over these lights just to give me a sense of depth perception. And I mean, I don't know really, I suppose it could have been done during the day, but it was really, really cool, and it stuck with me for it stuck with me forever, because it was such a kind of an amazing way to see, how close you can really fly to the ground and still have control of the plane. And now when I'm teaching somebody how to land an extra or something like that, I think about that, and I think about what he taught me. Yeah, I had the same things as everybody else. I'd have a death grip on the yoke, and really it just took little bits of pressures. And one thing that really helped me with that was when I started flying helicopters, because you have to be very, very light on the stick in a helicopter, and not have this death grip, white knuckle death grip on the stick. So, but I had the same challenges. I remember soloing. I was really, really excited. I soloed on my birthday, and I just remember being up there thinking, I can't believe that they let me do this. Don't they know, that I'm totally incompetent, So I think a lot of people have that feeling, and to me, it gave me so much confidence that I had never really had before in my abilities, especially being a female, where you're told, girls don't do this, but in my generation anyway,
yeah.
It's a little different. It's a lot different today, thank goodness, but it gave me a lot of confidence.
Wow. I think I remember my first solo as well. I remember taking off, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to land this place. I remember doing my downwind checks and literally screaming. If I had my PTT plugged in, the tower heard me screaming. I was like, I can't believe this. And,
that's the way I felt too. I felt the same way. I just couldn't believe it.
Fantastic. Okay, so you mentioned the extra, landing the extra. So you've flown lots of aircraft types. Obviously, the extra is what you're most famous flying for.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how many different aircraft types you've flown to date, and which aircraft, dare I ask, is the closest to your heart, and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't counted them for a while. I think it's around 150 types of airplanes, but I need to count them. That's a good. Maybe it was 125. It was 100 plus last time I looked, and I've flown a few more since then. But I've been offered some planes that I wouldn't fly to, so there's that.
That's another dimension. Okay, so let's start with the closest to your heart first, and go there.
Well, the extra for sure. I mean, the extra is the most amazing airplane because it's certified to plus and minus 10 Gs. There's no other plane that's like that. That's actually certified to plus and minus 10 Gs. The plane, there's never been a structural failure in an extra. It's incredibly strong. It's incredibly well built. It has a great German craftsmanship. They built, I don't know how many they built today, but there've been quite a few, and that's also good because you can gauge your airplane based on other people's planes that have higher time. So it's not just an experimental that you're out there sort of being a test pilot for. There's so many reasons that the extra, plus the performance, there's so many reasons why the extra is such a fantastic airplane. Yeah. I have to say the most exciting plane I've flown after that is probably the P-51 Mustang. And it's just, there's just nothing like it. Performance, sex appeal, history, sitting in that thing, the amount of power is just incredible. And, that's one of those planes you just get up there and go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm flying this thing.
Was that solo? Was that a single seat?
It had 2 seats, but I just soloed it myself, but I mean, I studied the book, the book's not very big though.
Yeah.
It's like World War II and they have cartoons in it. But I sat in the cockpit, I had pictures of the cockpit, and the plane that I first soloed, the Mustang I first soloed, had 2 seats, but I didn't want the pilot in the back. It didn't have controls in the back. I'm like, what are you going to do? Just make me, make me nervous. And so I had pictures of the instrument panel. It's really quite a simple airplane, but there's some really critical things about the Mustang. Coolant system, gear, that type of thing. But I studied the pictures, read the book, talked to a lot of people, made notes, sat in the plane, and then said, okay.
Let's go.
Time to go fly. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that must have been an absolutely fantastic experience, especially with all the nostalgia.
Oh, yeah.
The P-51. I guess that was a P-51D?
Yeah, it was a D, the first one I flew, and then I flew a B model.
Cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. That engine, the Merlin engine, is like nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you mentioned some aircraft that you wouldn't fly, Can you sort of share the dirt?
There have been some sort of one-off home builds. There was a plane called a Rebel a few years ago that several people had built from a kit, and it was a pretty good performing 6-cylinder engine monoplane. And it was really when extras were first, they were still 4 cylinders, and they were just building the first 6-cylinder extras. And everybody wanted more performance, of course. And I have a really good intuition when it comes to planes. I really listen to my intuition. I think it's really important for pilots to listen to their intuition, because airplanes will talk to you in really funny, kind of weird ways. But this friend of mine showed up at an airport where we were all getting together to practice for the nationals and said, I really want you to fly my plane because you're going to be getting a 6-cylinder airplane soon, and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I just had a bad feeling about it. So I said, Rick, why don't you go fly it first? You just come in from across country and you can, just, make sure everything's good. Well, he went up and the torque tube broke for the elevator. Wow. And he had to bail out of it. And, there's more to the story. It's a great story. It's very dramatic. And he walked away. I mean, he did the right thing, but, that could have been me. And that was one of the planes that I didn't want to fly.
what kind of conversation do you have with him after that? After he's picking up his parachute, dragging it back to the...
Yeah, he landed, the plane and him both landed in a field that was about a mile away from the airport where he took off, and we were watching him, and I guess a cop car, police went over and picked him up and drove him back to the airport. And he just walked over and said, I'm so glad you weren't in the plane. Thank God you weren't flying it. I'm like, yeah, no kidding.
Me too.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad you're okay, but I'm really glad you were in it, not me. So, yeah.
Yeah, get it. Okay, awesome, right? Well, we don't need to share any more dirt on other people's aircraft. I mentioned in the bio, an Olympian, 6-time member of the US Aerobatic Team, the first 3-time winner of the US National Aerobatic Championship. Tell us some stories about that and how you got involved and what brought you into those events.
Oh, sure. Both the World Aerobatic Championships, the international competitions, aren't actually part of the Olympics. They were only part of the Olympics once, and that was in 1936 during Hitler's era. And he had sort of rigged the aerobatic competition part of the Olympics that year by developing a single-seater called a 𝗂𝗑𝗃𝗃. And all the pilots back then were trained in what was called a 𝗂𝗑𝗃𝗃. And it's a 2-seat airplane. Well, he specially designed this plane, which is still a great flying airplane. I've been lucky enough to fly one called the 𝗃𝗃𝗃. And it was, yeah. So he kind of rigged it so nobody could beat the Germans because they had this great airplane. It was kind of a big secret. So it was built especially for the 1936 Olympics. So it hasn't been officially part of the Olympics since then. But I do put down, Olympic style, Olympic level world competition, which I believe it is.
Yeah.
So I was getting my ratings in Alaska, and I said to my husband, I said, I'm getting all these ratings, but I don't want to be an airline pilot. I don't really want to, have a job, and have a big career. So, I said, what I really want to do is aerobatics. And he said, well, let's go. And I said, but I'd never been to a show and I'd never seen a contest. So I just knew I wanted to do it, even though I hadn't seen it done. And so we flew to we had an airplane that we flew from Alaska. We flew down to an air show. And I was just like, that's it. I said, I can do this. And then we went to a competition. And I watched the best pilots and said, I can do that. I just knew I could do it. So I bought a little aerobatic plane, a little decathlon, started training, and my husband was real supportive. And then I started teaching in it, and that's how it started for me. And I didn't know where it was going to lead. I mean, I was really nervous my first contest, and I was just lucky I didn't come in last, and so on. But I kept going back, kept trying, and my goals kept changing. At first, I just wanted to fly a contest because, he said, just try it, fly one contest, fly one air show, see how you like it. And then you can do more. You don't have to do more. So I kept trying it. And then I realized that there was, I could get a spot on the U.S. Aerobatic Team. So that's what I went for. And then after a year or two, I realized that everybody said a woman could never win the nationals overall. And I'm like,
that sounds like great. A challenge, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It was for the perfect thing that I needed, a goal and a mission. And it took me 7 years to do it. And I learned a lot. I learned so much from that experience. I learned that you really have to educate people to let them know what your goals are and what your mission is, as much as you have to educate yourself. So, but my goals had changed, were constantly changing too. I'd set a goal, and then I was like, when I won the nationals the first time, I was like, what next? And then I'm like, well, I have to win it again, or else they're going to say it's a fluke. And then when I won it the second time, I said my goal is 3 times, and then I was happy with that. But it's goals are sort of, they're always changing. Your mission and your goals are always changing, and sometimes you don't know where they're going to take you.
Wow. Just jumping back quickly, just out of curiosity, do you remember that first competition that you were involved in? Do you actually remember your routine, and what did you do?
Yeah, I remember the first competition. It was I flew intermediate category at Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, in my super decathlon, and I'd never been over an aerobatic box, which is a very small cube of airspace that's marked on the ground, and there's some maneuvers I'd never done, and so it was very exciting, and I was really nervous.
Wow. And moving forward, as you progressed through, as you got better and you went through the stages of your career, especially leading up to the championships, who was teaching you?
I went to so many people. I went to all the best people I could find and asked them for help. And sometimes I'd call somebody 2 or 3 times and say, I know you're really busy, but is there any way you could critique me and coach me? And I would fly, hundreds of miles just to get somebody to watch me once or twice. And, it's like any aspect of aviation. People are always happy to help you in aviation if you show that you're sincerely dedicated to it or interested in it. There's so many great stories like that, whether it's aerobatics or just flying. Everybody wants to be a mentor in aviation, I think. So I went to the best people and I kept notebooks and I wrote down everything they told me and I just hang on every word and I still have all this big pile of notebooks. And I tell my students, I write down notes, keep notes. I don't think too many of them do, but it really helped me a lot because I'd get to a competition and I'd see these maneuvers and I instead of just trying to remember, I knew how to do them, but the little things that made the difference, like, how to make them better and the mistakes that you can make in them, I could just go to my book and go, oh yeah, there's a tendency to be, a little steep or a little positive or a little negative or whatever, the aerobatic pilots do. So I had a lot of great mentors, and some of them were like Bob Herendeen, 𝗘𝗽𝗀𝗃𝗁𝗃, Leo Ladenslager. They were all usually helpful.
Usually helpful, like that. These are kind of legends, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what do you think of today's and the Red Bull air races? What do you think about all that?
I think Red Bull's really cool. It's really brought a lot of attention to the sport. It's not pure aerobatics, so I wasn't real interested in it and getting involved in it myself. But I think I probably should have because it's pretty lucrative for the pilots.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think it's great. I think everybody's heard of Red Bull. They're doing amazing things in all extreme sports. So I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, they are taking almost every extreme sport to the next level and definitely elevating everyone involved.
Everyone, like 𝗘𝗽𝗀𝗃𝗁𝗃. I mean, look what they did for him,
Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the money's unlimited. I guess people drink a lot of Red Bull.
Oh, it's, crazy.
I think it's good. Anything like that gets people, involved in what we do, because it's such an esoteric kind of an arcane thing. There really aren't that many people that compete at any one time. So it's captured people, and they've done an awesome job of, of course, the marketing and the television. So
yeah. Okay. Competing in aerobatics is what you're most well known for, but I also mentioned in the intro that you've been a stunt and demo pilot. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, when I lived in the West Coast, I did more movie work than I do now. Now I just do some occasional stuff for Discovery Channel and things like that. Yeah, I've worked on some movies, and that's always really fun. I worked on this movie I was on this one movie for 2 months. It was not a very good movie, but
but the flying was amazing.
But the flying was amazing, yeah. And there's a lot of flying scenes in it called Drop Zone. So it's quite old now, but and I got to fly another really cool airplane, and that is a 𝗘𝗽𝗀𝗃𝗁𝗃. And so I got to fly that for like 2 months and got almost 100 hours in it, dropping skydivers and pretending to be out of control and so on and so forth. So that was really cool. And then I've done a lot of photo work. I've had a lot of Beechcraft. I've had a couple of Barons and a Bonanza, and have them always set up for camera work. So you can use my camera to shoot other planes out of my camera plane.
Yeah.
I have a little V-tail Bonanza now that's a great photo platform because we can take the back windows out. And it's a little economical, inexpensive airplane that makes a great photo plane. So that's cool. And what was the other?
Being a demo pilot.
I was really lucky to be the demo pilot for Raytheon/Beechcraft, because they changed their name and ownership a couple times for the Texan 2, the new military trainer.
Yeah.
And I was their demo pilot for about 8 years, and I flew Farnborough a couple times, Paris, Singapore, and a couple of shows in the U.S. as well. So I was their international demo pilot, which was really, really fun, working over there and meeting a lot of the demo pilots from overseas and so on.
You were definitely involved with you were part of the sales process then.
Very much so, very much so. And, I really had to make the airplane look good so that people wanted to buy it. And I hopefully I did, because it's been pretty successful.
Excellent. And I also mentioned that you've done some firefighting in California. How did you get involved with that?
Well, a few years ago, I decided I needed a change. I was kind of sick of doing so many air shows every year, and I wanted to fly the OV-10. And so I thought, well, maybe it's time to grow up and get a job. And because I hadn't had a job since I started flying, really, and since that one in Alaska that I told you about earlier. So I went out, and I always wanted to be, do aerial firefighting is like one of the last great VFR flying jobs ever,
Yeah.
So I applied for this job, and I had to talk them into it because they didn't really see the benefit of being an aerobatic pilot. And I had to convince them that, the energy management and so on was very much a part of, being a good fighter pilot. So they hired me, and I did it for 3 seasons. Flew air attack in an OB-10. And then I decided that it was being 6 months on at one tanker base was really hard. I really couldn't do anything else. And there's so many other things I want to do.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to do some single-engine air tanker work. I just came back from the National Aerial Firefighting Academy in California, and I'm going to fly it. They're called 𝗟𝗍s, and it's like an air tractor basically, and that they're used for federal contacts around the country. Whenever a fire pops up, you just go to the fire, and I can be on for a couple of weeks and then come home, so I don't have to be there for 6 months.
Wow. What's the aircraft called?
Air tractor.
Air tractor.
802.
802.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. Single-seat firefighter.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Single-engine air tanker, they call them. 𝗟𝗍s.
𝗟𝗍s. Excellent.
Yeah.
Great stuff. I also mentioned that you've been supporting worthy causes in Africa. That sounds really interesting. How do you get involved with that?
Oh, yeah, that's one of the best things I've done. We started, myself and this wonderful man, Dr. Bill Clark, who's a biologist and a professor and involved with international wildlife in many ways, started this project in Kenya to help the pilots of the Kenya Wildlife Service, because they're really, really important. The pilots over there, it's the only country in Africa that has a really dedicated sort of paramilitary organization that has an air wing for one, and that's dedicated to fighting poachers. And they do other things too, look for lost tourists and injured animals and things like that. So they have about 12 pilots, and the pilots are all assigned to different national parks, and they patrol their areas in Super Cubs and Huskies, 182s, 180s, planes like that. But they had a really high accident rate there for a while. They weren't. They were hiring low-time pilots and then giving them a plane. There was no recurrency training, no supervision, just sort of the recipe for disaster. And so we offered to come in and give them training every year for about a week, and getting all the pilots together and, fixing some of the procedures, cleaning up the flying. And then a huge part of that was that we got donations for a super decathlon, and we've had a decathlon over there to give them aerobatic training. So all the Kenyan Wildlife Service pilots have done loops and rolls over the sky of, 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝗀𝗽𝗀𝗽 and 𝗣𝗶𝗹𝗆 West with me. And some of them hate it and some of them love it.
I can imagine it. Oh no, Paddy's come in.
Yeah, that's what they say. And I make them wear a parachute, and they're like, "Oh my God!" And I'm like, "Come on, you guys!" They said, some of them are Maasai. I'm like, you're supposed to be these brave Maasai warriors who go out and kill lions with your bare hands, and you don't want to do a loop. So
Touch on that. How did you get first involved with? Is this something that you've been interested in anyway, or you just went via this contact?
Well, Bill Clark wrote me and asked me. He said, I had written a book. It was like 20 years ago, and he said, I noticed that you're really all about precision in your flying, and this is what these pilots need, and I think they also need aerobatic training. Would you be interested in coming to Kenya in your off season in the winter? And I thought, at first I thought, and when he sent me a picture, it was painted like a giraffe, and it was like a LSA or ultralight Zen Air, and I thought, oh, this man's crazy.
Camouflaged.
And it was giraffe, camouflage. And I'm like, and I thought, oh my God, this is like insane. I'm not going to go. I would never even consider it. I'd probably have to sleep in a tent and, fly this crazy airplane. And he wrote me again. And I thought, maybe I should not be so resistant here. And so he was in the States, and I met him, and he was very, very nice. And we got talking. So I went over there, and it was fantastic. And I've been going since 2001. Not every year, but almost every year. So I've probably been 8 times now.
Wow, that's amazing. I think this is where you mentioned earlier about your intuition, and following that is always a good thing. And also reaching out to people in aviation and how helpful they are. So you were the other end of that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely, and I've really gotten to make some really good friends over there. I love the pilots and following them, and they're all exceptional people. And of course, I've flown all over the country. I've been really, really lucky, and the safety record has improved quite a bit.
You have made a difference, yeah.
I think so. When you have such a small sample, of pilots, when there's only 10, 12 pilots you're working with, you really can't see the difference. When you're working with thousands, I mean, you can see statistics, but in this case, you really can see an improvement. So that's really exciting and rewarding.
Fantastic. That sounds great. So let's move into what you're currently doing in your current flying activities.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'm still flying shows, and I haven't flown competition for a while, but I stay involved in it, and I still practice it. But just about a year ago now, I started Patty Wagstaff Aerobatic School, and I didn't know where it would go. I didn't know how big it would get, but I kind of had a vision for it. And it has gone really well. It's been really exciting. We've developed some great courses, and I love it. I didn't expect that I would enjoy it as much as I have. The people that I've met, it's just been really, really fun and rewarding, and I enjoy teaching. I don't do all the training. We have a couple of fantastic instructors. I do a little bit of it. I do some of it, and I'm doing coaching. I just came back today from another small airport near St. Augustine, where we had 3 pilots there, and I was coaching them on the ground with radios and telling them how to fix maneuvers and so on. But I'm enjoying it more than I ever thought, and so now I really want to expand it. I even want to franchise it and maybe bring it overseas and use our model, in our syllabus for the model that we'd use in our franchise. So, I got to think big, right?
You got to think big, and I think that is an absolutely fantastic idea. And I'll take it from my point of view. I've always said that aerobatics, no way, not interested. But I haven't tried it. And I think if I do try it, I'll definitely come over to Florida and join you guys.
Come and take a course. Yeah. And, we have student pilots and we have ATPs. It just, every week it's different. Like last week we had an airline pilot for 𝗘𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗃. It's based in Panama, and he just hadn't done stalls, real stalls, run spins for a while, and wanted to brush up and get recurrent. And we have student pilots who don't even have their license yet, who want to learn the right way, and they're afraid that they're not going to learn what they need to learn with just a private pilot rating. So we get the whole gamut of people that they just fall in love with it and they want to go do competition. Or we had a guy that was afraid of flying and he came to try and get over his fear. So it's for everybody. And we call it an aerobatic school, but really it's a school of airmanship. And we call our courses airmanship and basic aerobatics, or airmanship and aerobatics, because you have to have good airmanship before you even start aerobatics. You have to fly coordinated and understand a lot of the basic stuff that people don't always get in their primary training. So it's really fun to see the light bulb go on, for people, and so hopefully it'll make a difference. We'd like to get some of those accidents that have happened recently. We'd like to get those pilots in here.
Yeah. I think what sold it for me was, in general, when you learn how to fly, it's like recovery from unusual attitudes.
Right.
And I saw on your site, it's like, something along the lines of, there are no unusual attitudes, when you've got the right training.
Good. You like that?
That was
right.
What sold it for me. I thought,
oh, good.
Yeah,
that's what we say. We say, if you know how to do basic aerobatics, there are no unusual attitudes.
That's what sold it for me. I hadn't even thought about it before until I saw that. I thought, that's it. So I think you're on a winner.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm so glad.
Fantastic. And what else are you up to?
Let's see. I'm going to do that firefighting, and I'm writing. I write a monthly column, which I'm overdue on this month, and I have to finish that tomorrow. I write a monthly column for Plane and Pilot magazine. Okay. And I like to ride horses, and I've got a couple of dogs, and I'm always busy, never bored.
I think you're definitely enjoying life, and you're doing what you're doing. You're feeding your passion anyway on a lot of levels there. So awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very fortunate and very lucky, and in a lot of ways.
Okay, let's go into something which I'm really curious what you're going to answer here. So what is your proudest moment in your flying career so far? Tell us that story.
That's a good question. My proudest flying moment. I've had a few, and they come at different times. Some of them come early, when you solo, and the first time I had to use my instrument rating, I got lost. My husband had a 185, and he let me take it out to Dillingham and pick up a girlfriend of mine. And we went flying around Western Alaska, and I got lost and had to climb up through the clouds and picked up ice. And it was the first time I'd ever gotten my instrument ticket wet.
Wow.
But I got there were no GPSs back then, and really I was too far out to get a VOR even. So we were kind of using NDBs, but I got us back, and that was pretty proud. I was pretty proud of that, surviving that,
Yeah.
and then winning the nationals. I think flying the Mustang in a tribute to the Wasps at the Gathering of Mustangs a few years ago was, I was really proud of that because I didn't have a lot of time in that airplane, but I put together a routine. You know, when I fly the extra, it's all going really, really fast. It's really hardcore, and you can't really fly to music to the beat of a song.
Yeah.
And I was able to do that in the Mustang. I had the music, and generally I don't have any sounds coming in the cockpit except the radio. But with the Mustang, I had them broadcast the music into the cockpit, and I flew to the music for this tribute, and it was really cool. So I'm proud of all those things.
Okay, so if you had to choose one of them overall that just sort of pokes its head above the rest, what would that be?
Well, from a flying standpoint, it'd have to be winning the U.S. Nationals the first time I won it, because it was such a big, thing for me, and it was really what being the first woman to do that made a difference. There have been several female national champions since then.
Wow, that'll do it then.
Which is awesome. Yeah.
That is really good. All right, so what are your future plans and aspirations? You mentioned about possibly expanding your flight training school. What else would you like to do, or do you have in the pipeline?
Well, that's a good question. I'm really, really dedicated to the school right now. That's what's really the most exciting to me because it's a new business. There's so much to do. I'll never get it done. We're trying to write the syllabuses and the operations manual. I want to get EASA certification for it so that it'll count toward a European European rating for aerobatics, which I know they're coming up with soon.
Yeah.
And I want to help make pilots better stick and rudder airmanship pilots. I want to, we see a lot of flight training in Florida, and this is not something I could have said 10 or 15 years ago, but I've flown for more than 30 years, and I feel like I can, and I had an accident-free career, and I feel like, I have the credentials, to say, we can make people better pilots with airmanship training. So, but there's a lot of foreign flight students in Florida. In fact, I think 97% of the students in Florida are foreign students, and which is great. But students from all over the world, really. But they're going back with very little time. You can get a commercial rating, and I think it's I don't know which part in the FAA, but a certain, part 141 or something. You can get a commercial rating with only 99 hours and maybe 5 hours of solo time. And I know. No, and they don't get any stick and rudder type stuff, or upset training is not required. And, you're getting people with a very limited experience. And I know they're still going to get airline training, but they don't have any basic stick and rudder training. And if I could just, push for that and try and make pilots understand what flies the airplane, getting the wing straight if you have an engine failure, flying the wing, etc. I don't want to get started because you'll hear from me all night. But
fantastic.
that's kind of what I'd love to make a difference in that way.
Making a difference.
That's what I'm really excited about. And then I want to find another horse.
How many have you got so far?
Well, I don't have a horse right now. I'm in between, so I need one. Yeah, one's enough.
Okay, everybody. Patty Wagstaff is in between horses at the moment. Read all about it. All right, Patty, this is my favorite part of the show. This is the quick fire checklist. This is where I ask you a series of questions and you come back to us, the inspired pilots, with amazing and inspiring answers. How does that sound? You ready?
Oh, boy. Yeah. Wish me luck. Okay.
What is the best piece of advice related to flying that you've ever received?
The best piece of advice is don't worry where it's going to take you. As long as you enjoy doing it, it'll take you where you need to be.
Excellent. Do you have a favorite internet flying resource that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I really like AirNav, but I don't think that applies overseas, but it's good for the U.S. It'll give you all the, airports, and that's on the internet. On my phone, I like ForeFlight. That's a great app. And those are probably the two that I use the most. Okay,
AirNav and ForeFlight.
Yeah, and AOPA, the website there is just amazing. There's just so much depth of information on that website.
Okay, I'll make sure this is linked to in your show notes.
Great.
Can you share one of your personal habits that you find useful and believe contributes to your flying success?
Yeah, personal habits. I think I'm a little compulsive in that, like I have to have a really neat desk to function. I can't come in and sit down and start writing something unless everything's cleaned up. And I think that that's good, because I think it sort of translates then into a sterile cockpit and having procedures that you follow and try and do the same thing every time. So it's maybe a little OCD, but I think that's hopefully that's a good quality for flying.
Sounds pretty good. And safety first, right?
Safety first, always. And procedures contribute to safety, doing the same thing every time. Not that, I don't live my life like that, but I think I'm, pretty much a creature of habit. I like to do the dishes at night, not wake up to dirty dishes, blah, 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 basic stuff. But I think that's the kind of thing you need to take into your flying. Being punctual, like I was on this call. But,
okay, we won't tell them about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I know the answer to this question, but let's hear what you have to say. Trikes or tail draggers?
Well, if you only have a tricycle gear plane, go for it, but I'd say everybody should start. I'd like to see all flight schools start with J3 Cubs and then move on from there.
You didn't disappoint me. Can you recommend one aviation related book?
Oh yeah, there's some really good ones. I just read one. Now I'll forget the name. I just read one the other day that I loved. It was a very small paperback. It's kind of quirky, and it's called Contact Flying. And I can't even think of the author right now. I'm looking at my library. It's self-published by a man in Missouri who has a school called Contact Flying, but you can get it on Amazon, and it's a great little book.
Okay, I'll look that up and I'll include that as well. Sounds interesting.
Good, thanks.
Okay, what is your favorite non-essential but essential to you technology gadget in your cockpit?
My phone charger. For one reason is that if I drop my phone, it'll still be hooked up to the charger. So that's pretty important.
Or anything, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. If you had a time machine and could go back and meet your younger self just as you were about to start your flying journey, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
God, that's a hard one. What advice would I give myself? I don't know. I think I did it pretty well. I think I was pretty lucky to start flying in Alaska, where there were so many opportunities to be around so many great bush pilots and things like that. But I'd probably fly. I maybe fly more, or I probably would have started sooner if I could have.
Started sooner, okay.
Yeah.
Inspired Pilots, you can find all the links to all the resources and everything else we've been talking about in today's episode by going to inspiredpilot.com and search for Patty in the search bar to find the show notes for this episode. Patty, listening to your journey and the stories you've shared have been very inspiring to me personally, and I know the listeners will find them inspiring too. Can you give the audience of Inspired Pilots one last piece of guidance, share how people can get in contact with you, and then we'll sign off?
Sure. One last piece of advice. Well, I always sign people's logbooks by, when they ask me to at air shows and stuff. And I think I got it from Wiley Post. I saw it in a museum where he'd signed somebody's logbook years, back in the 30s. And he said, "Keep your lift over drag." And I always thought, yep, that kind of says it all, right?
It does indeed, yeah. Keep your lift over drag.
Keep your lift over drag.
And how can people get in contact with you?
Patty at pattywagstaff.com, or my website is www.pattywagstaff.com, and that's Patty with a Y.
Fantastic. Patty, thank you for joining us on the show, for your time today. You've been very generous. On behalf of the Inspired Pilots, I'd like to say thank you and speak to you again.
Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Inspired Pilot podcast. Don't forget to head over to inspiredpilot.com. That's where you'll find the show notes for every episode, links to all the resources mentioned, and much, much more. Wherever you are on your pilot journey, get ready to be inspired.